Hello. Thanks everyone for joining us on the Marketing Resolution YouTube channel. Really appreciate you joining us. Today I'm pleased to have with me Rachel Virk. She's a family and divorce lawyer and mediator who has some really fantastic insights into how divorce works, whether you litigate it or mediate it. She's written books about it. She's the go-to person on the East Coast for this kind of matter. Thanks very much for joining me today, Rachel.
Great to be here, Natalie.
So I want to chat with you sort of at length, but to make each video a bit more palatable, what I'd like to do is break them up into a series. And so based on the bits of your book that I have, we're going to break these videos up into a series of 5. So this is the first of 5. And so to start us off, always, it's good to start at the beginning, just like Mary Poppins told us to do. So, Rachel, my first question is, let's say that I'm heading for divorce for whatever reason it might be. What do I do? Where do I start? What's the first thing that I need to do?
The first thing you need to do is get informed. You need to understand what your rights are, what your responsibilities are, and what the rights and responsibilities of your spouses are. A lot of people feel like they can talk with their family member who went through a divorce, or their friend who works in some law office or used to work in a law office, or their uncle who's an attorney but not a family law attorney in another state, or their hairdresser or golf buddies. And people come to me and they have all kinds of stories like, I can't move out, it's desertion, or I can't take the kids and go to an apartment even though I'm being abused, or I shouldn't go get a job because it'll hurt my alimony case. And people hear all sorts of things that are not necessarily helpful. So it's super important to just go for a consult, meet with an attorney, pay the money, spend some time finding out answers to that super important question, like, can I even leave? Is it okay if I leave? What should I do? So the first step is really get some good information. There's a lot of stuff on the internet, but it is not necessarily state specific. It might be dated. And there are even differences where I am in Northern Virginia between how judges in different counties might have a certain bent, or even particular judges within one county might have a particular bent. But you want to know, what are your local judges going to do? Here in Loudoun County, Virginia, our juvenile court judges might view certain things a certain way. And maybe upstairs in circuit court, those judges might view things differently. So that might play a big part in deciding whether to go to intake for free and file something in the juvenile court, or to put the money out and file a separate maintenance or divorce case up in the circuit court. So get informed. Can you take money out? Can you liquidate all the assets? Can you load up a truck and move out of state with the kids? Maybe, yes, maybe. Even though you're allowed to, it may not be a good idea. Maybe it is a good idea. Get informed. That is the number one most important first step.
Okay, so I think that if I were in that situation, one of my big concerns might be money. And lawyers can be expensive. Is it absolutely necessary that someone hire an attorney?
Yes. Yes, at least to get informed, at least for a consult. I would say from these past 29 years that I've been practicing anecdotally, I would say that probably about half of the people who see me are going to have a rather amicable, fair divorce. They're going to sit down with their spouse, or with their ex-to-be, as I like to call them. They're going to look at something maybe like the topics list on my website under the Getting Started tab, and they're going to start talking about, how do we want to file our taxes, who gets the mortgage interest deduction, who's going to do the health insurance, and of course custody and support and property division. And they'll work a lot of things out, and they're not going to grab all the marbles, and they're not going to make things very difficult. Those people often are able to do things, buy their new home, sell their old home, refinance, pay each other money for activities, keep the kids going back and forth. I don't see those people because they're just doing it. Okay, but I do see a lot of people that can do it with a little bit of advice and guidance, and they're not necessarily going to, run into court and have a long, protracted negotiation. But even those people, when there is a retirement account to divide, it's important to have it written up properly. You cannot get those forms off the internet. And if you don't do it right, and especially if there's military retirement to divide and you don't do what you need to do within a certain time frame, even if you agree on things, you'll never be able to accomplish it or effectuate it if it is not done exactly correctly.
Now, that's really good information to have. What if it's not amicable? What if my soon-to-be ex and I can't talk about those things? What if, for example, my soon-to-be ex is emotionally or physically abusive?
If your ex-to-be is abusing you, likely they've been abusing you for a long time, and likely they're pretty much of the belief that they can keep on abusing you because you haven't necessarily stood up to them in the past. And now it's time to stand up. And that's easier said than done sometimes. It's very hard if you are suffering from such low self-esteem. And by the way, you might be the guy, you might be the gal. I've certainly had clients, male clients, who have been very much physically, verbally, emotionally, mentally abused by their spouses. So the first thing is to understand there are resources out there. There are people and groups who can help, but you just need to get out and you need to stop. And if you have kids, you need to stop teaching them that this is acceptable, that this is a norm for a marriage, because they will grow up kind of thinking that, okay, love is like that, or it doesn't matter what they think or what they want. They can't speak up. It's important not to speak up and express what they need and want in a relationship, because that's the behavior that was modeled for them. I've had a number of lady clients over the years that put up with a lot of abuse over the years, horrific abuse. And I don't know if it's because they feel financially they can't make it on their own, or in some cases there might be cultural reasons. But there's also a kind of a guy that's abusive, and he actually wants the marriage to end, and he's trying to get her to leave him because he wants to be the victim, and she just won't go. And then he starts kind of doing things that are harmful to the children. And that's when she finally comes to see me and we talk about it. Or if a lady comes and she's being abused and she's still saying, well, I don't want to leave for whatever reason, I'll try to make her think about the worst he has ever made her feel. Yeah, remember that time he had your head in the toilet and you peed? Yeah, that time, okay? And I try to get her to feel that feeling and say, look, do you want your daughter to be in a relationship where she feels like that? It's time to do something. Sometimes there's codependency where somebody's holding on to a belief of what their spouse could be or should be or what you want them to be, but it's not what they are. And then it's a matter of understanding what codependency is. And, in the beginning when someone is trying to leave an abusive relationship, they probably were in that relationship because of low self-esteem, and they're going to benefit by, if they can find the resources, the money, the health insurance, meeting with a mental health professional to give them the tools to be strong and to stand up and go.
And that is really important. It takes a lot of bravery to make that break. I mean, it really takes a lot of chutzpah. I understand that. If there are children involved, how important is it, do you think, that the children have a mental health professional of some sort, either in the mediation or in the litigation, or just have someone available to talk to, someone that's not been in that relationship? Is that super important, do you think?
Well, you mentioned in mediation or litigation, about 25% of my caseload are mediation clients, and they are different, usually a different subset than the litigation folks or the very adversarial negotiation folks. So people who are mediating are generally really focusing on their kids a lot, and usually they're isolating their children from as much conflict as possible. There may not even be a whole lot of conflict. And for those kids to start, taking them to therapists and all that almost makes them feel like there's something wrong with them when there isn't. And that may not be necessary. It might even be damaging if a child thinks, oh, there must be something wrong with me, when there's really not, and they're coping very well. For people who are litigating very heavily and there's a lot of conflict, when I see that level of conflict, I usually hear stories that their kids are really acting out and having a lot of trouble. Sometimes it's not so much that the child needs a therapist, it's that the parents should see a parenting coordinator to teach them how to communicate and get along and stop using their child as a spy or trying to get their kid to take sides or using their child as a messenger. It's not that the child needs therapy, it's that the parents need to understand how to stop bringing their child into the process. And that goes a long way. And that's more a matter of parents sitting down with a parenting coordinator who helps really devise a set of rules and means for communication. But people who are heavily litigating, unfortunately, aren't going to agree to see a parenting coordinator, and the courts don't have the authority to make them. So here it's just a matter of a person hopefully understanding the damage that they're doing by fighting with their spouse, by fighting in court, by fighting in front of their children. We are attorneys and counselors at law, and I do take seriously my role in at least sharing with my clients what I see in my ugly cases. And if they are going down a certain path, I can almost predict what's going to happen if they keep engaging in certain behaviors. But sometimes people are very motivated to do what they feel is the right thing. Years later, they might look back and realize maybe it wasn't the best thing. It's a difficult process, and it would be helpful if parties would listen to their lawyers and listen to the professionals, because we see what happens, we know what happens, and some people want to hear it and some people just don't.
Yeah, I can understand how people get positional, because it's, in my experience, I've watched a handful of people go through this process. It doesn't just happen overnight.
Oh, no.
This is not something that, just blows in on the wind. There's usually something that's been going on for a while, whether it's infidelity or they've been falling out of love with each other or whatever the situation might be. There's a buildup to it. And so those of us on the receiving end are probably in denial about it. Those of us on the active end, for whatever reason, we just let it go on and on and on. That brings me to my next question. Does it make a difference if I'm the one that's receiving the request for a divorce versus the one seeking a divorce?
Well, I think we talked in an earlier conversation about the stages that people go through when their marriage is ending, the denial, the bargaining, the grief, anger, acceptance. And if your ex-to-be has told you that he or she wants a divorce, they're already at acceptance. You might still be living in denial, bargaining, grief, shock, fear. This isn't fair. How do we tell the kids? What about the future? How do we tell everybody? What about money? The mindset is very different if you're the one being left and it came out of the blue. And sometimes it does come out of the blue. Sometimes it really doesn't, but somebody was living in denial a lot. So if you're the one being left, it's really important to understand the emotions that you'll be going through, to understand that it's normal to feel anger and fear and confusion, with a goal to getting to acceptance. Often people will come to see me, they just found the cell phone records, the emails, the texts, they see their spouse having an affair, and they don't want the marriage to end. And it's more likely than not that their spouse is already checked out. And it's important for that person to get to acceptance so that they can get informed, see an attorney, find out their rights and the other party's responsibilities and their responsibilities and the other party's rights. And they need to make a plan of how to move forward and where they want to be. If they're the person who has decided they want out, it's important to, depending on the situation, sometimes get all their ducks in a row, sometimes get all their financial ducks in a row. Sometimes there are steps that can be taken to protect assets. I'm not saying people should go empty out all the bank accounts, but I don't know, in some cases, maybe yes, maybe no, it depends. The person who wants out, depending on the reasons that they want out and the plans that they have for moving forward, should also make a plan. And if it's an amicable situation, they really do need to tell their spouse, I want a divorce. I don't want to spend the rest of my life with you. Because if they feel like it's more kind to let the person down gently and just do the, well, you know, I'm just not happy. It's not you, it's me. I just think we need to separate. They're keeping their spouse from getting to acceptance and moving on. Again, it comes back to get informed and make a plan. Because as I've mentioned and we discussed earlier, the first step is denial, and then comes bargaining, and then grief, and then anger, and then acceptance. Then get informed, and then make a plan. There's two kinds of plans. The first plan is, how do we want to resolve this? Litigate, negotiate, collaborate, or mediate. And the next make a plan is, where do I want to be 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now? And if the plan is to write up a document, that document, and we should talk about this further, it's going to be the most important document you will ever sign in your life. So getting back to the previous question you had about, do I really need a lawyer? Yeah, because if that document's talking about your children, everything you've worked for, your retirement, your home, you need to write it up properly. There are too many mistakes that are made if you try to do a homemade or an internet type document.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's really important to do things correctly, to do things right, to do things with the right agenda in mind for lots of different reasons. You know, it's a really difficult time, and it makes it even harder for people to be good humans, I think. And so it is really important to talk to a professional, trust what they have to say, let them be evaluative, and give you some reality checks. I think that, you know, those things can't be overstated. So
can I mention a subset of divorce that is not that uncommon, at least here in Northern Virginia? I have had many clients who come to me who tell me the second their spouse got their green card, they were done and they left. And it's apparent that that person came here for that reason. And this is a small percent, but the numbers are not insignificant of people who have come to me with that. And you know, these are good people that entered into their marriage with every hope of it lasting forever. And then it became apparent that that's not what the other person and or their family had as an agenda. So that person needs to understand how to protect themselves, what happened, why it happened, and work on their self-esteem. You know, it's not because you're not a good person. I also have a lot of clients who come from other countries, and maybe their spouse is being abusive, or maybe the expectations being put on them are unrealistic, and they decide they just don't want to spend the rest of their life in that relationship. But if they leave their spouse, excuse me, it will have big ramifications for people back home. It might mean their sisters back home will have a harder time getting married because they're in a family where somebody would leave their spouse. Or maybe their parents will not support them in the divorce, and they don't really have a lot of other support. Some people can go back home and stay with their parents and finish up that degree and get some help with housing and daycare while they get back on their feet. Some people don't have that kind of family support, and sometimes for religious or cultural reasons, there may not be that kind of family support. And I have had people who came to me and said, if I leave my spouse, my family will disown me and they will never talk to me again. But my husband is beating me up all the time. He expects me to work full time because he wants me to bring in money, but he wants me to cook and clean and take care of the kids and take care of him and do everything else. And I just can't live this way. Again, I'm not trying to paint anybody badly. You know, I'm not trying to sound bigoted or anything. My husband's from India, so it's not like I'm trying to say that anybody who comes from another country is in a bad marriage. That's certainly not the case. but there are people who, for cultural reasons, especially women, feel like they cannot stand up, they cannot leave. And there are American women who feel that they cannot stand up and they cannot leave. But I think the cultural ramifications are greater for some people than others. And it's a huge decision to walk away from a marriage. And sometimes these marriages are marriages of families. And it's actually the families who are actually divorcing. I might have a client who comes in with, both parents and a couple of brothers and an uncle or two, and they sit the whole time like this, just looking down while everybody talks. And I have to really make sure as an attorney to find out what's going on with my client. But at the same time, those of us who mediate understand that sometimes it really is a divorce of families, could be an amicable divorce of families. We may have gold jewelry worth $100,000. And somebody in that family knows exactly who gave what set. They know exactly where every piece came from. And that's one of the things that happens sometimes with some of my divorces. Somebody immediately goes and takes all that jewelry, which was sitting around the house, which is worth a lot of money. And that becomes a point of contention. We have to work that out. And often all the families get involved in that. So, when you talk about the decision to leave or are you being left, I just want to state that sometimes it's a very unfortunate thing if there's a cultural aspect to it where somebody was used to get immigration status here. Sometimes it involves two families divorcing, and there's a lot of discussion and involvement and a strong focus on the attorney making sure they're doing what their client wants, not what their mother, father, sister, brother, uncle, aunt wants. And sometimes it's a matter of understanding the ramifications of what that divorce is going to do for some people who come from other areas. So as mediators, and litigators and negotiators, we have to have a lot of expertise in a lot of different sensitive areas.
Well, it sounds like there's just so much to think about, so much to act upon, so many filters that I would need to use if I were seeking a divorce, that, having a resource like you, like your website or like your book, The 4 Ways of Divorce, if I had that information in advance, it might settle me a bit. It might reduce some of my anxiety. It might, let me not move away from the emotional bits, but at least be able to categorize the emotions in such a way that I could then move forward with the strategic end of what has to be done.
And knowledge is power. I really do believe that divorce can be a process of finding oneself. It can be liberating. As times have changed and people feel that if maybe they're not living their true authentic self. I have had clients who've come to me and said, I've decided that I would rather spend my life with another man, or I've decided I would rather spend the rest of my life with another woman, or I've decided that I'm in the wrong body and I'm going to get, I don't want to use the wrong phrases, but gender reassignment surgery, or I'm going to transition, or I'm going to live my authentic self in the body that I was meant to be in, not the body I was born with. So I've had cases like that. And how is that going to affect the children? Sometimes they handle it better than others. And again, divorce is not something that is the same for everybody. The reasons vary. And often it really is about finding a new path to a liberated lifestyle if somebody is unhappy. But if they were happy and now they're being left, well, then they have to rebuild a life and try to find happiness again, not necessarily with another spouse, but to find the joy within themselves so that they can be happy again. And I do want to say that when someone is left, 20, 30-year marriage, there can be this idea, well, does that mean it was all a lie? Does that mean that it was all for nothing? And I think it's very important for these people to understand that even if your marriage is ending, it does not mean the good times were not good times. You have every right to hold on to those good times. And it's not that the divorce process is tearing away parts of you. It's more that it is turning you into the person you are becoming in a new life. And going through that process is an opportunity for some spiritual growth, for some personal growth, for finding joy. It is a process, and you're also modeling for your children, friends, family, and yourself how to conduct yourself through that process. You can be spiteful, mean, vindictive, angry, bitter, depressed, feel like you're a victim and just give up. Or you can hold your head up, do what you have to do, have some dignity about it, fight assertively for what you need to fight for, and rebuild your life.
Yeah. And I really, really like that sentiment. And I love that we can leave this number 1 in the series of 5 on a happy note, because I think that it is sometimes a challenge for people to find happiness. So I think that, you know, for lots of us, happiness is a choice that we make.
Yeah.
It is a diet of the mind. And, you know, so you can only sit and listen to sad country western songs for so long before you've got to turn on a little, you know, Pharrell Williams happy and get back on the horse, put your dancing shoes back on, watch comedy specials, not sad, sappy Hallmark specials. You really do have to continue to reaffirm the happiness, availability, the opportunity to be happy rather. And I think that is important. But so Rachel, I want to ask for you to mention to us your website and the information about your book. And of course, I'll put that in the description down below, so that if someone is watching this and they've got questions, or they know someone who's going through a divorce or thinking about divorcing, or maybe is even, you know, at the tail end of getting a divorce, they can provide your information as a resource. So would you mind quickly sharing what your website is?
Well, if I had the book, I would hold it up here and say it's The 4 Ways of Divorce. I didn't think to do that, but the book is The 4 Ways of Divorce on Amazon. My name, Rachel, R-A-C-H-E-L, Virk, V like Victor, I-R-K, will bring you to my website, which is virk-law.com, www.virk-law.com, or The 4 Ways of Divorce. A lot of information there.
Perfect. Rachel, thank you so much for being a resource to everyone who's watching. This is really key, important information for people to have. And I really appreciate you spending time with me, and I'm looking forward to number 2 in our series.
Well, thank you, Natalie.
You're welcome. Everybody, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, especially if you are or you know someone who's in this situation. The goal here is to make lives better for everyone around us. Thanks very much, everybody. Be good humans.